Imagine the entire history of life, 4.5 billion years, compressed into a single breath. A planet learning to breathe, to freeze, to burn, to begin again. From the first ripples of soft creatures in ancient seas, to the thunder of giants and the quiet rise of humankind, every era leaves behind a whisper, a clue, a spiral repeating through time. This is not just the story of Earth. It is the story written in it, of survival, transformation, and memory older than language. Listen closely, because by the end, you may recognize that the pattern shaping mountains, storms, and stars is the same one beating inside your own chest. And so, the journey begins, back through the layers of time, into a world before memory, before names, when the first pulse of life stirred beneath a silent sea. Mist clings to a low coast where the sea is more idea than edge, a shallow sheet that creeps forward and slips back without hurry, polishing the plane of sand and fine silt into silver. The air holds a tang of minerals and the weight of thin oxygen, a breath that does not yet welcome haste. Far inland, rock lies bare, and ice grinds its lessons into high ground. But here the shore practices softness. Light passes through a gauze of haze, turning the horizon into a pale seam, and the water breathes in long, slow strokes that carry entire seasons in their foam. Beneath the skin of the shallows, the ground is alive in a way that does not resemble motion. Microbial carpets stitch the seafloor into velvet, their surfaces furred with bubbles that catch the weak sun and release it as a watery glitter. No shadows dart, and no schools rearrange. Instead, the pageant is of shapes that refuse the tyranny of a spine. Fronds set like candelabras in the ooze, quilted discs pressed to the mat, delicate leaf bodies that branch and branch again without ever becoming leaves. Each form holds the sea rather than cutting it. Each bears an elegance that comes from solving the problem of staying where the tides can still feed. The camera drifts across a grove of standing fronds, each body divided like frost on a window pane, mirrored ridges doubling into fine lies a shape like a segmented cushion, a gentle ladder of lobes that made its living by pressing its underside to the carpet and sipping in slow ovals. It does not know hunger as chase. It knows only the pace of the day, the patience of cycling light, and the diet written into the floor. Across the plain, ripple marks lift and fall like a language of yesterday's wind. On one slope of a ripple, the microbial mat thickens into a glossy skin that heals after each scuff, preserving what should have vanished. A faint crease crosses this slope, a narrow track where something once pressed down and the mat flexed around it. It is not a footprint. It is the suggestion of mass making choices that are neither drift nor collapse. The sea deepens by handspans as the tide returns. Particles of iron float like dull glitter, staining the light from within. Grazing the edge of the frond grove, a low swell passes, and as it does, fine silt lifts to dance and then fall again. The fronds pay attention the way weather vanes pay attention, revealing direction without understanding it. A clutch of tiny cones, softer than fruit, leans in the flow, and when the eddy reverses, they lean the other way, completing a movement that could be called a step if steps were made by surrender. Time here is not counted in days, but in layers. The camera eases downward until the water becomes a sheet of blur above, and the mat is all. Faint polygons cross its surface, tension lines where the film tightens under heat and then relaxes under cool. From beneath the mat, Bubbles rise along channels learned over many cycles. Where bubbles are trapped for a while, the surface tents up into small domes before giving birth to bright beads that pop and vanish. Nothing falls upon the mat from above with intent. Everything rises into it from within. Chemistry rehearsing biology in slow draft. The light dims as a cloud of high dust wafts over the coast. Inland, ice scrapes another valley. Far seaward, volcanoes write ash into of scratch marks sits at its end. Regular enough to feel like teeth, and yet too soft to be anything but pressure and pattern. Nothing leaps, nothing strikes. Still, the plain feels newly inhabited by appetite. A gust skates the shallows and uncovers a patch the waves usually guard. There, pressed into the upper skin of silt, rests a small spiral. It is not a shell lifted here by a breaker. It is the memory of a body that once curled around a center, the imprint preserved by the mat's tender stubbornness. The spiral is perfect in its imperfection. One side sharper where weight bore down, the other smudged where water rephrased the edge. It is neither signal nor message, only a shape that recurs when matter is given time and a way to turn. The tide line creeps forward again, shivering the edges of ripples into glitter. The fronds, once prone, lift to their full height, restoring the orchard of quiet geometry. The discs shine as if polished from within. Bubbles arrive and break, and just beyond the grove, where the furrow begins, the faintest drag track continues under the incoming water. A line drawn by an unseen body that understands direction well enough to return to it. The shore accepts the mark with the same indifference it grants to light and ash and seasons, laying the next thin page upon it, sealing curiosity into the floor. The spiral remains where it was pressed, half revealed, half buried, waiting for the long story to turn back to it. But stillness never lasts. Beneath the calm tide, motion gathers purpose, and the quiet coast begins to dream of teeth. Light enters the new sea like revelation, slicing through water that is suddenly full of forms brave enough to move. The once muted plains bloom into motion, and every inch of depth becomes contested. Shells, plates, and jointed limbs flash where before there had been only softness. The age of stillness collapses under an avalanche of invention. In the upper layers, clouds of plankton turn sunlight into green smoke, drawing up entire worlds beneath them. Below, the sediment ripples with travelers armored in shining glass and calcite. Their spine flashes white with force. Beneath the hunters, the trilobites keep to their work, pushing silt aside, building invisible roads. Some vanish into burrows, sealing themselves under blankets of sand when shadow falls across them. Others cluster in shallow depressions, sensing vibration as warning. The sea has learned to fear, and in that fear, the future begins. A swirl of turbulence disturbs the bottom. The camera follows it upward, tracing the path of a body dragged from below. Between the layers of sunlit green and the darker world beneath, particles turn to stars, each mote a tiny fossil in rehearsal. The predator tears through the cloud and disappears again, leaving only a rain of fragments, legs, shells, the brief architecture of life returning to dust. The seabed becomes a tapestry of leftovers. Carapaces lie like scattered coins, gleaming faintly, still perfect in shape, but empty of purpose. Soft currents drift over them, and sand begins to settle, filling every curve. A silent burial has already started, one that will last for 500 million years. Above, another army of trilobites marches on, unaware that their own skeletons are invitations to the same stillness. The light shifts toward gold as the day deepens. Each shimmer in the water becomes a blade. Movement slows. Even the predators tire of pursuit and hover, bodies rocking gently in the tide's pulse. Around them, dust thickens into a suspended haze, dimming the brightness into a ghostly blue. For the first time, shadow is visible underwater. The camera pulls back, rising through the column of murk to the surface. Here, the sea stretches calm and wide, a mirror trembling with salt and heat. Across its skin move faint ripples born from the commotion below, carrying the rhythm of chase and escape into the air. Then, without reason, the frame crosses the line of the horizon, and the sound of the ocean thins. A strip of land appears. It is nothing but wet stone and sand, a shore forgotten by the tide. The water retreats, leaving its signature behind. Wave marks, ridged and glistening, glowing. Hunger remakes the world. Yet even in chaos, the shore waits, ready for the first shadow to rise upon the land. Both world learns the color green by accident. Rain, long practiced on stone, begins to linger, and where droplets rest, the rock grows films of life. Across black basalt, tiny colonies of lichen spread like patient handwriting, their threads carving messages into silence. The air, once a thin corridor between ocean and void, now smells faintly of wet dust and breath. Mist clings low, its moisture rationed to the survivors of each dry hour. From above, the land still looks barren, but on its knees it has begun to think. Each morning begins in silver, the sun filtered through vapor. Thin mats of moss-like tissue crouch in the hollows of stone, soaking what dew remains before wind steals it. They do not reach upward, they grip. Their roots are rumors, shallow filaments that borrow strength from what once was bare. Minute tendrils trace cracks in the basalt, leaving behind green dust that will become the first soil, the quietest conquest in history. Tide pools, left behind by a reluctant sea, brim with beginnings. Filaments sway in puddles no deeper than a hand, small translucent tubes rising and collapsing with each breath of air. When sunlight warms them, they purl with oxygen, tiny spheres breaking at the surface like laughter. But the joy of air is brief. Without the sea's embrace, skin tightens, color fades, and the rhythm falters. The shore teaches a lesson harsher than hunger, the difference between being alive and being sustained. From the margin of one pool, a shadow detaches itself. An arthropod, armored and small, pushes across the slick rock. Its limbs, jointed and deliberate, lift and plant with the focus of a climber testing each hold. Its carapace gleams where salt has dried, and for a moment it pauses, antenna waving at a wind that means nothing yet. The air bites, leaching water through every seam. Still it moves, drawn by something older than fear. A gradient of again, weaving the damp crust into a fabric the storms cannot peel away. Farther down the slope, where the shore meets the shifting edge of the ocean, the tide itself seems uncertain. It has grown restless, as if aware of what it has given up. Waves creep higher, then retreat, testing the new texture of the world. Between rocks, small arthropods scuttle, descendants of the drowned, carrying the instinct of return in their shells. They leave tracks like miniature rivers, sharp, temporary, and precise. Each trail ends at a pool, as though the earth itself were still drawing maps for those brave enough to cross it. Mist gathers as the light softens. A faint pulse shivers through the shallows, not from wind but from something moving beneath. The water darkens, bubbles rise, burst, and reform in spirals. Near the rocks, silt drifts upward, clouding the surface. Then the shape appears, a curve, wide and deliberate, passing just below the reflection of sky. Its outline bends light the way heat bends air, a reminder that the sea keeps its secrets close. The camera lingers on the pattern it leaves behind, a faint whirl, a ripple of wake that folds into itself and vanishes. The plants sway, their thin bodies glistening in the last trace of day. From the darkening water, a single wave climbs higher than the rest and spills over the lichened stones, reaching what was once unreachable, reclaiming the color it had allowed to exist. When it slides back, it leaves silence and the echo of movement just beyond sight. A promise that the ocean is not yet done with the land it helped create. Green takes root where there was only stone. But the price of breath is fragility, and the sea has not yet finished with its creation. The air thickens until it feels almost liquid, a heat that hums rather than burns. Marshes stretch into the haze, steaming beneath a copper sun. Each pool reflects the color of iron, and the ground yields with a soft sigh under any waits in a trench of shade. Its eyes sit high on its flat skull, watching both the surface and what lies above it. When it lifts its head, the skin along its sides gleams like wet bronze. It listens to a language of vibrations, the thump of droplets, the sigh of reeds, the distant hiss of a drying pool. When it lunges, it is not attack but experiment, a rehearsal of steps that have no name yet. The swamp itself breathes in slow rhythm. Water seeps through peat and roots, carrying clouds of life too small to see. Dragonflies the size of hands drift above the pools, their wings leaving faint wakes in the mist. In places, the mud cracks open to reveal clay rich with minerals, streaked with lines that mark the retreat of water. Each line is a sentence in a story of drought repeating itself, carving memory into earth. The camera drifts low, across the face of a shrinking pond. Fish bodies flash in the shallow film, silver and desperate, their mouths opening to a sky that gives nothing back. Around them, amphibious shapes press outward, drawn by instinct more than hope. The boundary between survival and decay is measured in breaths, and some take that gamble into the air. Acanthostega pulls itself onto a slope of roots, its fins digging into the slick mass of decaying vegetation. For a moment, it holds itself clear of the surface, ribs lifting, mouth widening in an awkward gulp. Air rushes in, rough, unfiltered, new. The creature's sides shudder as lungs expand, then contract. The sound is small, but it changes everything. It rests there, trembling, half in the old world, half in the new. Behind it, the water sighs, as though amused at the attempt. When it finally pushes forward, the trail it leaves is a stuttering line of impressions, a record of indecision pressed into mud. Each mark is wide at one end, narrowing as the body slides. Some are deep enough to cast shadows. From above, they look almost confident, a string of footprints leading into the unknown. But the path curves, loops, and circles back toward the dark pool that birthed it, the water, leaving no evidence of ambition, only a reflection of gray sky. Somewhere beneath that mirror, the guild and the breathing coexist for a while longer, each believing it has found the safer side. A single breath reshapes evolution. From swamp to stride, life inches toward land, unaware that every footprint will one day vanish beneath the returning tide. The light in this age is green even when the sky is black. It filters through endless tiers of fern and club moss, through trunks thicker than houses, through fronds that arch into vaults so high the forest seems built for breathing itself. Moisture drips from everything, bark, air, even the shadows. The ground squelches with each movement, releasing the smell of ancient rot and new creation. This is the world remade by oxygen, where every spark of decay feeds life's fever rather than ending it. Above the swamp floor, insects drift like jewelry. Wings shimmer in slow spirals, catching fragments of light in the mist. Dragonflies with eyes like glass beads hover among the tree stems, their span wider than a hawk's. Millipedes as long as fallen branches coil through the undergrowth, black and copper, moving with the patience of tides. When they pass, they leave trails that glisten and then fade. The air hums not with sound, but with weight, a saturation of breath thick enough to taste. The forest is both cradle and trap. Amphibians roam its puddled floor, bodies sleek with slime, eyes bulging against the dim light. They lie in wait near pools, limbs strong and short, each breath a visible effort. When they move, the splash is soft and brief. Their eggs hang from ferns like strings of pearls, trembling under the slightest vibration. Beside them, the first reptiles stir, scaled, dry-skinned, the pioneers of autonomy. They bear their young in solitude, sealing life within shells that can outlast drought. Their movements are slower, deliberate, but their eyes hold something new, independence from the wet. The camera glides low through the forest, following the trail of a molting creature. A thin sheet of skin, pale and translucent, clings to roots before sliding free. It folds upon itself like is alive. Above, thunder mutters but never commits. The trees sway slightly, their upper branches tangled in clouds that never clear. A gust stirs the canopy, scattering spores like dust through sunbeams. For a moment, the air becomes snowed with seeds, glittering, weightless, each one carrying the promise of another forest. They drift down through layers of moss and root until they disappear into the black mud, where heat and decay wait to cradle them. The reptile moves again, disappearing beneath a fallen trunk. In its wake, a larger presence shifts, something neither predator nor prey, but the early shadow of lineage. A thicker body, longer ribs, stronger jaws. The synapsids, carriers of a spark that will smolder for eons, are already stirring in the corners of this wet paradise. Their blood runs warmer, their sleep lighter. They claim nights too cold for others, learning the art of heat. The forest hums around them, unaware that these quiet shapes hold a future that will eventually inherit the world. The camera returns to the shedskin, now half buried under litter. A beetle crawls across it, pauses, and drills through the thin film, its mandibles glinting like tools. Beneath the forest's surface, everything becomes fuel. Peat thickens, layers press down. Time begins its slow distillation into coal. Each breath of this green world carries its own ending. Then the rhythm changes. The air, once heavy and wet, begins to dry in seconds. A strange hush follows. Droplets that clung to leaves vanish before they can fall. The mist pulls back, retreating toward the canopy as if recalled. The insects hesitate mid-flight. Even the ever-present chorus of frogs falters. Something unseen has shifted. The balance of breath, the weight of heat, the trust between water and earth. The camera tilts upward. The forest trembles in stillness. A faint wind moves through the trunks. Not the warm sigh of rain-bearing air, but a dry whisper that cracks bark as it passes. Spores still float, but now they fall faster, pulled by gravity rather than carried by life. Exist only as memories etched into stone. Even the oceans, far beyond the dunes, have grown listless and strange, their surfaces slick with decay and their depths bereft of breath. Across the vast interior of the land, the air trembles with heat. Dunes move as living things, sliding and folding over one another, swallowing the ghosts of forests and swamps that once sang beneath rain. Each gust rearranges the surface, erasing what little remains of direction. The horizon flickers with mirage, blurring into the color of ash. Insects that once ruled the skies are gone. Amphibians lie buried in dried channels, their shapes preserved like fossils before their time. The camera drifts low across this skeletal world. Here and there, rib-like trunks jut from the sand, pale as ivory. Once they held crowns of leaves broader than houses. Now they resemble monuments to a forgotten age of abundance. Every few miles, a hollow depression marks where a lake once breathed. Its bed cracked, its edges etched with rings of salt. At the heart of one such basin, a solitary carcass lies half-buried, armor dulled by grit, its bones forming small dunes of their own. A wind rises, carrying with it the fine powder of distant continents. The sky, already the color of rust, deepens toward brown, swallowing the horizon. Grains of dust cling to everything, coating the land in a uniform pallor. Light loses its edge, and time follows suit. Even the shadows seem to dissolve, too faint to hold shape. In what was once a forest valley, the ground still carries traces of roots. They thread through the soil like the veins of a long-dead hand, their hollows filled with sand. When the wind sighs through them, a low hum emerges, a sound that might be mistaken for breathing. But nothing breathes here now, save for the planet itself, turning in its long fever. Oceans, once teeming with life, have turned into graveyards of silence. The water holds no oxygen. Its creatures float in still. A seed cone lies there, small, dust-scoured, its scales cracked but intact. It must have fallen long ago, perhaps carried by the dying breath of some vanished tree. It catches in a fissure between stones, held fast by chance. For a moment it trembles, the wind testing it, then leaves it still. Around it everything hums with desolation, the muted roar of sand in motion, the endless sigh of the heated air. Yet the camera remains fixed on that seed. Its ridges are carved with faint spirals, symbols older than knowledge. A single grain of moisture clings inside one groove, hidden from the glare. Nothing stirs, but the world has paused around it, as though waiting to see whether this last remnant will dare what everything else has failed, to begin again. The wind shifts once more, pulling the dune's crest sideways, sending a small cascade of sand over the cone. It disappears halfway, half buried but unbroken. The sky deepens into blood-red dusk. Shadows return briefly, longer and colder, tracing the cracks that might one day cradle roots. For a heartbeat, silence rules completely. The air stills, The dust drops, and even the dunes hold their breath. Then, far beyond sight, thunder murmurs, not the storm of return, but the echo of something surviving. The seed rests in its crevice, motionless but waiting, the smallest flicker of defiance against a planet that has forgotten how to breathe. From ash and emptiness, the planet begins again. The seed remains, and with it the certainty that life will not stay quiet for long. The light returns, sharp and unfiltered, pouring through air newly washed of ash. The sky is no longer red but white-hot, clear as polished glass. Across the continent, the ground gleams with the color of iron and dust, striped with the pale trunks of young conifers. The planet exhales after its long fever, drawing oxygen back into its lungs. The hush of the great dying has faded, replaced by the faint, restless hum of beginnings. Deserts stretch wide between green veins of river. Wind carries the scent of resin from the conifers, their needles catching the sun like thick.
Creature, half the height of a man, built on narrow hips and long tendons. Its spine flexes like a bow with every step. Sunlight glints off the smooth armor of its skin. It pauses, head tilted, eyes bright as polished amber. This is one of the new runners, an early dinosaur balanced between grace and hunger. When it moves again, the pace is effortless, each stride carrying the body farther than the last, a living equation of speed and patience. Nearby, the earth breaks into a shallow gully, and the camera follows. There, in a pocket of shade, another shape rests, a crocodilomorph, still and patient, its body half buried in dust. Only the eyes move, two gleaming coins above the surface. When the runner passes too close, the dust erupts in a sudden surge, jaws snapping, teeth flashing like shards of glass. The strike misses, and both vanish into a whirl of motion, predator and prey, mirrored by design, testing the efficiency of new machines of muscle and bone. Silence returns as the dust settles. The sun lowers slightly, casting long bars of gold across the terrain. Overhead, clouds gather in thin, high ribbons, too fragile for rain. Across the plain, small herds of lizard-bodied creatures move in unison, their tails weaving behind them like flags of balance. The rhythm of the age has changed, no longer a crawl, but a run measured by endurance rather than bursts of desperation. At the edge of a dried riverbed, the camera finds a new kind of quiet. There, under a slope of conifer roots, a tiny shape scurries through the debris. Its body is covered not in scales, but in fine fur, pale against the dark soil. Its head is narrow, its eyes bright, and its nose twitches as it searches the air. The creature's limbs end in clever paws, delicate but strong, able to dig and grasp. It darts between shadows, vanishing into a burrow carved into the bank. A soft rustle follows. Then, stillness. Inside that burrow, the creature presses close to the earth, warmth radiating from its body into the cool soil. Its heart beats faster than any around it, fueled by a flame that will not go out when night muscles coiling like whips beneath reflective skin. They are marine reptiles, heirs to an ancient oceanic legacy, their flippers slicing the light into ribbons. The world has begun to move again, from desert to reef, from air to water and back, every form chasing the perfection of motion. As the sun sinks, the last light catches the edges of those footprints. A breeze lifts the sand, softening their outlines, blending predator and prey into one pattern. The burrow remains hidden, the tiny furred creature asleep within. The land exhales slowly, as if satisfied with its progress. Night arrives, and with it, the heartbeat of a world that has remembered how to run.
Earth splits and stretches. The runners inherit the wind. Movement itself becomes the new form of survival. The Earth begins to drift apart, its skin splitting like clay left too long in the sun. What was once one vast continent now trembles with the slow violence of division. Cracks widen into valleys, valleys into gulfs, and soon water invades the wounds, pouring into lowlands that had never seen tide. Shallow seas bloom across the edges of land, their surfaces warm and milky with silt. The air carries a taste of salt even deep in the forests. The camera sweeps across this unraveling world, a planet in motion, shedding its old shape for something more intricate. Forests surge along the new coastlines, thick and lush, their crowns knitted so tightly that light filters through in green shards. The trunks are pillars of amber resin, gleaming where bark has split under its own weight. Ferns crowd the ground, coiled and unfolding in endless succession. Mist hangs low, feeding everything, and from within it emerge the architects of this verdant empire. A sauropod moves through the haze like weather-given muscle. Its neck arcs above the canopy, sweeping aside branches heavy with spores. The air vibrates with the sound of slow thunder, each step pressing a memory into the earth deep enough to survive eons. When it exhales, steam rises, twisting into the air like the breath of thermals, wings stretched tight like parchment. Their calls echo between cliffs, faint and metallic, disappearing into cloud. Storms gather along the rift valleys, lightning crawling over the waters that divide the world. When the rain falls, it does not cleanse. It reminds the land of what it lost. The rivers it feeds now flow toward different seas, their courses bending with the planet's slow fracture. The camera returns inland, to a clearing where a fallen tree steams under the midday sun. Along its trunk, scavengers pick at moss and insects, each species precise in its role. Among them, smaller dinosaurs flit between roots, plumage catching light in brief, iridescent flashes. They are quick, nervous, shaped for agility rather than size. Every limb, every breath, every heartbeat feels specialized. A world learning to divide not only continents, but purposes. At the edge of the clearing, the sauropod passes again, leaving a trench of mud where its feet pressed. The camera lingers behind it, moving close to the base of its spine. Beneath the massive tail, where bone thickens into the pelvis, lies a hollow, an anatomical chamber cradled between ridges. The light catches inside it, glinting off slick tissue and pooling water. For an instant, it appears deep, mysterious, almost deliberate. To the lens, it could be mistaken for something more. A second brain, hidden in the giant's shadowed core, guiding its monumental frame with silent intelligence. The illusion feels persuasive, even reverent, as though the creature carries thought in two places. But the camera shifts, the angle changes, and the illusion dissolves. It is not a brain, only structure. A trick of space where bone lightens its load. Nature's geometry confused for design. Still, the image lingers, a seed of wonder that the future will misread. The world itself is beginning to specialize, and misunderstanding will become one of its oldest instincts. Rain returns by evening, sweeping across the split continent in waves. Rivers carve deeper into the new coasts,
carrying fragments of forests into the widening sea. Yet even the perfect design carries the shadow of collapse. Both world breathes in rhythms of warmth and chill, never deciding which season to keep. The Cretaceous sky glows pale and wide, its light diffused by drifting ash from distant volcanoes. Winds cross entire continents, carrying pollen like gold dust. Flowers bloom where once there were only ferns, and grass unrolls its first carpets across the edges of rivers. Insects shimmer above them, wasps, beetles, moths, threads of color weaving through the new green tapestry. The air hums softly, and for a brief moment the planet feels civilized in its abundance. Forests rise again, taller and more intricate. Pines and magnolias stand side by side, their scents mixing in the heavy air. Between their roots, mammals the size of mice dart through shadow, soft-furred, alert, and almost invisible. They move with a precision learned from generations of survival, knowing that above them, the age of giants still rules. Each step, each heartbeat, is taken under the tremor of something vast. The camera drifts north, where warmth fades into chill. Here, the sun never climbs high. It circles the horizon like a tired lantern. Snow lies in streaks between the dark conifers, and the rivers run beneath thin lids of ice. The silence is absolute, broken only by the creak of frozen bark and the faint hiss of falling flakes. Yet even in this half-darkness, predators move with purpose. Through a curtain of snow, a shape emerges, Nanoxaurus, small by tyrant standards but perfect for the cold. Its body is sheathed in pale feathers that catch the light like frost. Breathe clouds from its nostrils in steady rhythm. Each exhale curls upward, then vanishes into the still air. Its steps are soundless, the wide paws spreading over the snow so that no print sinks deep. It pauses, head tilted, nostrils flaring. Scent and sight share the work, one gathering what the other cannot see. Around it, the forest whispers. Somewhere ahead, a herd of horned herbivores grazes on a hollow beneath leaning pines. Inside the hollow lies a shallow nest lined with feathers and tufts of moss. A few eggs rest within, smooth and ivory, their shells faintly luminous under the weak light. The creature noses them gently, rearranging the down, then folds itself over them, feathers expanding to form a living shelter. The camera lingers close, each filament of plumage visible, trapping warmth molecule by molecule. Under this fragile roof, life endures the cold in complete silence. Outside, the snow continues to fall, layering the nest until it resembles nothing more than a gentle rise in the landscape. Night settles in slow gradients. The horizon glows faintly, not with sunset, but with the Earth's own electricity. Then, from the northern sky, the aurora unfurls, a river of green and violet fire twisting above the world. It dances across the ice fields, reflected in every crystal, every flake, every feather. The camera lifts, rising from the nest toward the sky, where ribbons of light bend and fold in spectral rhythm. Below, the small mound of snow remains undisturbed. Beneath it, warmth gathers around the unbroken shells, the pulse of life steady against the frozen ground. The aurora flickers once more, brighter than before, painting the snow in color. The light stretches across the horizon, a silent bridge between seasons, between extinction and endurance. The camera holds there, on light, on motion, on quiet persistence, until even the stars fade behind the green glow, and the world turns again toward dawn. Feathers glitter under auroras, and life learns warmth in the cold. But overhead, the sky prepares a reckoning bright enough to erase memory. It begins with stillness, the kind that arrives before every great change. The shoreline lies quiet beneath a late Cretaceous sky, the sea flattened by heat, its color the pale green of molten glass. Wind has stopped. Even the waves hesitate, their crests collapsing in slow motion. Across the dunes and vanish. The shore becomes a boiling sheet, the world a single exhalation of fire. When sound finally arrives, it is a wall. It crushes distance, folding mountains and waves into one shattering note. Ash begins to fall before the echoes fade. Pebbles, glass, fragments of bone, all rain together, hissing as they meet what remains of the sea. Where land once lived, everything glows. Molten lakes, flaming trees, rivers of light flowing downhill. The air itself catches fire, a storm of embers circling the globe. Daylight becomes red, then gray, then gone. Weeks pass, then months. The camera moves through the dim that follows. Ash drifts in slow, endless snowfall, covering valleys, plains, and oceans alike. The sun is a rumor behind the clouds, its warmth a memory. The planet cools, its breath shallow and cold. Black water retreats from the shore, leaving behind lines of soot that mark each failed attempt to rise again. The plants are gone, their stems brittle, seed heads hollow. The survivors of the forests stand like monuments, trunks without crowns, their shadows swallowed by ash. In the oceans, silence reigns. The waves, once alive with color, are flat and dark, their surfaces broken only by drifting mats of debris. The camera glides beneath them, through water choked with dust and the slow rain of the dead. Corals lie pale and skeletal. Fish drift like ghosts in suspended twilight. The sea, which has always been the refuge, has turned into an archive of endings. Years gather in the dim light. The cold deepens until even the tropics know frost. The shoreline lies buried under meters of gray, yet beneath that weight, the earth stirs. Heat seeps upward from its inner fires, finding cracks in the frozen crust. Rain begins again, slow and acid, washing the ash into rivulets that cut dark veins through the dunes. One by one, they reach the sea and vanish. The camera returns to the same coast where it began. The air is thin but clearing, and the clouds break for the first time in generations. Sunlight falls across the water, pale at first, then golden. Once was ruin. Light spills over them in widening arcs until the entire shore gleams, the color of forgiveness after fire. The camera lingers there, long enough for the breeze to move the leaves, long enough for the sea to erase the last of the old footprints. Then the tide creeps higher, reclaiming the coast, and the world exhales again. Out of fire comes shadow, and from shadow, renewal. The world has burned, but the soil still remembers how to grow. The light of the new age is gentler, washed clean by what came before. The earth exhales again, its breath warm, carrying the smell of wet soil and flowering ground. The seas regain color, turquoise bleeding back into their depths, while forests rise where ash once lay. The silence that ruled after the fall is gone. In its place comes movement, small at first, then wild, persistent, unstoppable. The age of giants has ended, but in the emptiness they left behind, smaller hearts beat faster, ready to fill every shape the world allows. The camera moves through a plain rippling with green, grasses spreading like a tide across the land. Above them towers Indricotherium, tall as a house, its long neck reaching into the crowns of trees. The creature moves with a calm certainty, each step bending the earth without breaking it. Dust rises behind it in soft spirals, blending with light. Birds follow in its shadow, plucking insects from the air its movements stir. Its eyes are deep and unhurried, but there is calculation there. A gentle giant testing a world that once belonged to thunder. Far to the south, rivers widen through marshes reborn from ancient scars. The water carries warmth again, the taste of life instead of decay. From its banks slips Ambulocetus, part beast of land, part whisper of whale yet to come. Its body glistens with oil-dark fur, limbs strong but uncertain of their allegiance. It drags itself forward, then slides into the current, where movement becomes poetry. Each stroke is smoother than the last, each breath deeper. The pull of the river feels familiar, like memory calling it home. When it dives, the camera follows, down through murk into the wide blue, through leaves. The forest itself seems to breathe with them, a chorus of possibilities rehearsing consciousness. Meanwhile, in the oceans, the world experiments once more. Whales emerge from their amphibious ancestors, their bones reshaped for depth, their songs beginning to form in the dark. Coral reefs return, rebuilding the cities of the sea. Schools of fish shimmer under newly stable skies. It is a planet waking from fever, eager but cautious, its pulse steadying after catastrophe. The camera drifts southward, following currents that circle the globe. Here, at the edge of the world, the air grows sharp and clean. The land gleams white beneath thin sunlight. Antarctica, wrapped in the first true sheets of ice. From the heights of its glaciers, the wind blows outward, carving waves across the Southern Ocean. The water below moves in vast, invisible spirals, cold ribbons that slide beneath warmer layers, setting the seas into endless motion. These currents begin to connect the continents like arteries, yet they also divide them. The camera looks down from the edge of orbit, tracing the blue ribbons as they swirl around the southern cap. They loop endlessly, self-contained, locking heat and life above them. It is a gate closing slowly, separating the warm world from the frozen one. No sound marks its creation, no storm announces it. Yet its influence will shape every breath and heartbeat to come. As the scene returns north, life continues its quiet mastery. On the plains, herds move with confidence. In the forests, small hands reach farther. The Indricotherium lowers its head to drink from a river whose current carries echoes of the one pulling Ambulocetus toward the sea. The air is thick with pollen, dust, and the pulse of renewal. The continents, still grinding, whisper to each other through earthquakes and wind. Evening falls in a soft amber haze. Across the grasslands, shadows stretch long, touching the feet of mountains that never existed before. In the distance, the ice glints with faint blue fire under the last light. The camera lifts higher and higher until the curve of the world reveals itself. Dry soil. Its leaves bend but never break. The wind becomes its ally, carrying seeds farther than rivers ever could. Across the Miocene world, the ground itself begins to whisper in yellow and silver tones, endless fields shimmering under the sky's slow breath. The air changes too. Invisible chemistry rewrites the script of life. Through C4 photosynthesis, the grasses learn to steal more from sunlight, drinking less, breathing differently. They alter the balance of the atmosphere, thickening the breath of the planet while starving old giants of their comfort. The age of endless forests fades behind a shimmering veil of dust. The new rhythm is dry, bright, and hungry. The camera glides low across the plains. Hooves drum against the earth in endless repetition. Herds of grazers spread to the horizon. Horses, antelopes, camels, and rhinoceroses move together like tides of muscle and dust. Their bodies are lean, lungs deep, built for distance. Migration replaces territory. Motion becomes survival. Each step raises a small cloud that drifts upward, merging into the haze that now defines the season. From a distance, it looks like the land itself is smoldering, a slow, perpetual burn of dust and sunlight. Predators rise to match the change. The grass hides nothing, so stealth evolves into speed. Cats stretch longer, their shoulders anchored for sprinting. Dogs grow heavier, jaws widening into bone-crushing tools. The camera focuses on one shape among the hunters, Amphision, the bear dog, broad as a lion but lower to the ground, muscles rolling under coarse fur. It moves with deceptive calm, a quiet confidence earned from dominion. Its paws print deeply in the dust, the marks of weight and certainty. The herds sense it long before it is seen. Movement ripples through them, a wave of awareness crossing the plain. The Amphision watches, patient, nostrils flaring. When it runs, the sound is thunder on dry earth. The chase is brief. Too much power for distance, too much precision for mercy. When it ends, silence returns almost immediately. The predator stands over its prize, chest rising slowly. From above, it looks like glass cracked and forgotten, the ghost of an ocean exhaling its last memory. Dust devils wander across the surface, tracing circles that vanish as quickly as they form. The land around it bears fossils of coral and shell, reminders that this brightness was once blue and full of motion. Now, no tide comes to claim it. Only heat moves here, shimmering upward, distorting sky and distance alike. The mirage of water flickers again and again, a cruel echo of the sea that used to breathe. The camera lingers on that salt flat, the light trembling across its face. Tiny grains glitter like stars embedded in the crust. Each crystal holds a droplet of the vanished ocean, sealed in perfect transparency. Wind sweeps across, scattering the smallest pieces into the air, turning the sunlight into brief halos. For a moment, it seems as if the world has inverted, the land reflecting the heavens, the sky caught beneath the ground. A shadow moves across the glare, long and steady, but it belongs to no lion. The shape is heavier, slower, a remnant of what strength once meant. It crosses the salt and disappears into the haze without trace. The camera rises, taking in the immensity of the plain. The salt flat gleams like a frozen sea, bordered by ribbons of gold grass that ripple under the coming night. The wind changes, carrying a hint of cold from distant mountains. The horizon bends with mirage light, and for the briefest moment, the reflection of the sky seems to breathe again, an illusion of life returning to what was lost. Then the light fades, the shimmer dulls, and only the whisper of salt remains, waiting for another sea to remember it. Grass writes a new story in wind and dust. But where life spreads wide, water begins again to disappear. Barrett descends through air that trembles with heat. Below lies a scar across the continent, a hollow where the sea has vanished. The Messinian Basin, once the Mediterranean, lies exposed like the bottom of an emptied chalice. Where blue once stretched to the horizon, there is only glare, endless salt, vanishing before they reach the bottom, boiled away mid-fall. The air smells of sulfur and dust, the ghost of brine caught in every gust. Nothing lives here but heat and mirage. Yet life, as always, waits just beyond reach. In the shadow of the basin's cliffs, hardy plants clutch to ledges, feeding on fog that rolls in during the few cool hours before dawn. Animals trace the high rim of the vanished sea, peering down as if recognizing something lost. From this height, the emptiness looks impossible to fill. Then the camera rises higher, tracing the arc of continents converging. Africa drifts north, slow and inevitable, closing the ancient gap between itself and Europe. Pressure builds along a narrow fault, a line of weakness cut deep through the rock, a gate sealed by accident of geology. Beneath it, the Atlantic waits, its weight straining against stone, patient as gravity itself. Time compresses, the screen darkens, then flashes with the tremor of collapse. Stone gives way with the sound of a world exhaling. In an instant, the ocean breaks through, a roar that swallows continents. The Zanclean flood begins. The first wave is not a wall, but a mountain of water, racing faster than sound through the narrow breach at Gibraltar. It devours the desert below, carving valleys into whirlpools, flattening dunes into foam. Dust turns to steam. The air itself screams. Within months, the basin begins to fill, the water climbing thousands of meters, reclaiming its forgotten floor. The salt towers dissolve in seconds, releasing trapped bubbles of ancient air that burst like quiet applause. The camera dives beneath the surface, following torrents of sediment and shattered crust, tumbling into the abyss. For a moment, it is chaos incarnate, rock and water, heat and cold, every element rearranging itself in a single act of restoration. Then the turbulence subsides, replaced by calm. The sea reforms as if nothing had ever happened. Blue once more, its surface flawless and new. On the seabed, the camera glides past the remnants of the old salt stacks. They gleam faintly in the filtered light, entombed beneath fresh sediment, relics of a time when the sea forgot itself. Tiny organisms already drift as waves. The sun sets over the horizon, turning the surface to molten gold. Beneath that shimmer lies a secret world of memory. The salt beds entombed in darkness, the fossils that once baked under a merciless sun, the layers that remember both emptiness and flood. The sea sways gently above them, oblivious to its own resurrection. The camera pulls back, the headland shrinking into distance, the blue widening until it fills the frame. For a heartbeat, the reflection of the sky looks exactly as it did before any of it happened, proof that even the greatest loss can be hidden beneath the calm face of water. Then the light fades, leaving only the whisper of waves against stone, a rhythm older than memory, carrying forward into whatever world will follow next. The sea forgets itself, then remembers. Flood and drought trade places, and the rhythm of the world finds its symmetry once more. Barrett, the warmth begins to waver, subtle at first, a slight cooling of the breeze, a thinner scent of earth after rain. The world has not yet noticed its own transition. The Pliocene glow still bathes the continents in soft gold. Seas shimmer wide and calm, and forests stretch toward horizons of promise. But far to the north, where daylight fades too early and lingers too long, the first hints of change assemble quietly in the air. Clouds form lower, thicker, more deliberate. Snow begins to fall where it had never settled before, a dusting that melts by noon, then a covering that endures till dusk. The rhythm of the planet has found a new metronome, the long, slow beat of ice. The camera rises above the forming glaciers, vast white fields spreading outward like sheets of thought across stone. They crawl over valleys and mountains, remaking geography with patience only gravity understands. Beneath them, rivers are pressed into sleep, Entire forests vanish under a silence deeper than death. Yet within that silence, the planet remembers. Each snowfall traps the breath of the sky. Each thaw writes a line of correction. Layers begin to stack like pages of a book. The memory of climate, recording every pulse of warmth and every gasp of cold. When the camera moves closer, the ice reveals its secret architecture. Stripes of faint streaming in plumes that fade into twilight. The cold sculpts them into endurance, thicker fur, heavier lungs, hearts built for distance. Their shadows stretch long against the glare, fading into the mist like smoke. Between these titans move smaller survivors, foxes, rodents, early humans shaping tools from bone. Fire becomes a covenant between species, a promise that warmth can be stolen back from the dark. The glow of their campfires mirrors the aurora above, green and red ribbons that twist through the polar night. The world, even in its chill, refuses to surrender beauty. The ice continues its slow breathing. Advance, pause, retreat, return. The continents rise slightly as the weight shifts. Oceans withdraw, then rush back. Shorelines migrate like restless travelers, leaving ghost beaches miles inland. Wind scours new paths across the open plains, sculpting rock into smooth monuments. The heartbeat of the planet steadies to this new cadence, neither crisis nor peace, but the perpetual rehearsal of both. Deep beneath the surface, the camera follows drills descending into the ice. Imagined tools of a future species seeking answers. Cores emerge slender and glowing, each one a frozen timeline. Within them, layers of soot mark volcanic tempests. Faint rings of pollen reveal ancient summers, and sudden voids of ash tell of fires that blackened entire hemispheres. Every inch is a record of struggle and reprieve. The story of the Earth has become measurable, readable, fragile enough to melt in a single hand. Far above the glaciers, magnetic fields waver. The compass of the planet stutters, poles wandering like sleepwalkers. For a time, the magnetic north fades, then reappears on the opposite side of the globe, as though even the Earth's heart is unsure of direction. Yet each reversal is survived, each uncertainty written into the next layer of ice. The memory remains intact even when the storyteller forgets. The camera sweeps across the rustle of grasses long gone, the heat of vanished suns, the promise of cycles yet to come. The world has learned to remember itself, one frozen heartbeat at a time. Ice returns as historian, pressing the planet's pulse into crystal memory. Each freeze and thaw carries forward the heartbeat of everything that came before. The wind rules now. It combs the open grasslands in long, restless strokes, carrying the scent of dust and rain, of ash from distant fires, of beasts too far to see but close enough to sense. Forests have withdrawn, leaving scattered trees standing like punctuation marks on the horizon. Between them stretch the savannas, wide and merciless, where survival requires not shelter but motion, not strength but foresight. The world has grown larger, its distances exposed. The camera lowers into this expanse of gold and shadow.
where a new kind of creature is learning to walk through time itself. A figure crosses the plain, fragile and defiant. The body is upright, the spine balancing against gravity's pull, hands swinging free at its sides. The creature, Ardipithecus, then Australopithecus, and all the unnamed shapes between, moves not just forward, but away. Away from the trees, away from the past. The posture is awkward but persistent. With each generation, the gait steadies. Hips narrow, feet flatten, arms shorten. The earth feels different under this kind of step. Less like ground, more like invitation. The air above the savanna vibrates with life. Herds of antelopes and elephants move in columns, tracing the routes carved by seasons. Lions and saber-toothed cats stalk the margins, sleek as shadows. Overhead, vultures circle, patient archivists of failure. In this vast arena, cooperation becomes as valuable as hunger. The camera pans across a small group of early Homo habilis, faces streaked with dust and light. They share the weight of a drought.
The migrations ripple outward, ribbons of persistence traced across continents that do not yet know their names. In their hands, stones take on purpose. Edges sharpen, flakes fly, and the first symmetry appears. The act of shaping becomes its own revelation. The moment a thought turns into permanence. The camera lingers on one such hand, dark and strong, lifting a tool that catches the sun and returns it in fractured light. A flash on stone, simple and infinite. Knowledge as reflection. Time folds forward. Ice returns, then retreats. Land bridges open like doors, connecting worlds for a breath before drowning again beneath rising seas. The camera drifts over one such bridge, narrow and windswept, where travelers cross with fires and shells and baskets of dried roots. Behind them, mammoths move like slow storms across the horizon. Ahead lies a coast lined with cliffs, their faces scarred with caves that will one day hold echoes of laughter, art, and memory. The first marks appear on rock. Lines, circles, hands. At first they are random scratches, gestures without grammar. Then one pattern begins to repeat. A spiral, carved deep into stone, winding inward and out again. It mirrors the shape once pressed into Cambrian mud, the same geometry that began life's story. The camera closes in on it, the grooves filled with dust and shadow, sunlight grazing the edges. It looks deliberate, though its meaning is lost. Perhaps it was just an imitation of a shell, or perhaps a symbol of something older than understanding, the awareness that everything moves, changes, and returns. The wind sweeps across the carvings, filling the grooves with sand. The camera pulls back, rising above the savanna, the rivers, the coastlines, the trails of migration. Firelight glimmers in scattered points across the land, faint as stars reflected on water. The upright figures walk on, smaller with distance, their shadows stretching endlessly before them. The planet turns, and the wind continues its work, sculpting ridges, carrying seeds, erasing footprints. The camera lingers on the spiral carved into the stone one last time, catching the last ray of sun before dusk. For a moment it gleams as if alive. The first architect. Rivers overflow, leaving dark ribbons of silt behind. In that silt, seeds wait, the earliest pact between earth and hunger. Crops rise where wild grass once grew, bending in the wind like small armies of light. Hands, practiced by now in shaping stone, turn to soil instead, coaxing yield from its patience. The harvests are uneven, But the idea takes root. Security in exchange for movement. Time traded for storage. Granaries rise. Woven baskets swelling into clay silos, then into walls and towers. From food comes surplus. From surplus, story. Villages thicken into towns, towns into cities. The camera moves through them as if through an unfolding mind. Walls marked with soot, smoke trailing upward in spirals that resemble the first carvings on rock. Fire no longer guards the night. It obeys. It bakes clay, softens metal, hardens ambition. The glow that once danced in the savanna grass now burns behind doorways, captured and tamed. Iron answers hunger, but it also forges new appetites. Metal plows deepen the fields, blades cut forests into lumber, and the rhythm of breathing earth begins to change. Forests retreat like defeated armies, their mosaics thinning across continents. The air smells of sap and ash. The camera pulls back to reveal patches of cleared land spreading like wounds stitched with roads. Smoke from thousands of small fires blends into the sky until dusk becomes permanent. Yet beneath the haze, rivers gleam silver, winding through the scars as if remembering something older. A promise of renewal that the world still tries to keep. Trade flows where rivers meet the sea. Boats drift outward, wooden skeletons bearing clay and copper, grain and story. In their wake, new tongues evolve, new borders take shape. The horizon fills with sails instead of wings. Empires rise from coasts, not caves. The old shoreline, once a wild edge of tide and foam, now bears breakwaters, straight and deliberate, holding back the same sea that signatures, and the light bends differently through it. The sun sets redder each century. The camera pans slowly across the horizon. Faint graphs shimmer above the landscape, like ghosts of data projected on air. Unlabeled, silent, undeniable. Their lines rise and fall with harvests and extinctions, with heat and ice, with the rhythm of lives too numerous to name. The viewer sees them only as suggestion, a flicker in the mist above a city, a reflection in the rippling surface of a reservoir, a pattern faintly traced in the smoke above the plains. In the polar ice, tiny bubbles form as witnesses, air trapped inside crystal walls, holding each century's breath. In tree rings, another record grows. Wide bands for abundance, narrow ones for drought. The planet continues to write, though few remember how to read. The camera returns at last to the familiar shoreline, the motif that has followed through every age. But now it is unrecognizable. The cliffs are faced with concrete, the dunes replaced by docks. Water laps at pilings and steel walls instead of reeds. Cargo ships hum beyond the horizon where trilobites once crawled. The sea itself reflects the lights of harbors, fractured by oil and neon. A gull circles overhead, its cry thin and sharp against the mechanical rhythm below. The tide is still faithful, still rising and falling, indifferent to the walls built to contain it. Beneath the surface, salt grinds against steel, patient as time. The camera lingers on that meeting, the old ocean and the new ambition, until even the distinction blurs. Then, quietly, the scene fades. The shoreline remains, steady and eternal, but something in the sound of the waves has changed. It carries an undertone now, low and distant, a whisper of recollection, as if the planet itself is trying to remember what was promised when the first seed broke the ground. Fire no longer guards the wild, It builds the world, but the more permanence we create, the more of the past we forget. The sea breathes against the shore, steady and indifferent as it always has. Waves fold over one another in long, deliberate sighs, brushing against the
Release. Life expanding, then folding back into itself. The camera moves close to the waterline, where tiny shells tumble in foam, tracing that eternal geometry once more. Far to the south, unseen but felt, the great current continues to circle Antarctica, the locked gate of cold that divides the world's warmth. It turns and turns, unbroken, regulating every breath of weather that touches this coast. Its invisible spin connects to the feathers once frozen under auroral skies, to the soot and pollen trapped in the veins of ice, to the salt still buried beneath the Mediterranean's floor. All are threads of the same loom, woven through ages, tugging at one another in a balance so precise it could almost be mistaken for intention. The camera rises, tracing that balance across the planet's skin. The continents gleam with rivers and scars, forests and deserts, each pulse linked to the next. Mountains bleed meltwater into deltas. Storms harvest warmth from the sea and spend it on snow. Grasslands exhale oxygen into air that returns as rain to the jungle. Even the wind that brushes this seawall has crossed half a world to arrive here, gathering scents of resin, ash, and bloom along the way. Then the frame narrows again, settling on the shoreline itself. Today's coast, alive in its quiet persistence. On the stones, lichens sprawl in fractal constellations, half plant, half mineral, their colors glowing in the mist. Birds wheel above, their wings catching the light like thin glass. Their cries echo the voices of those feathered hunters who once stalked through polar snow. In the reeds beyond the seawall, small mammals flicker between shadow and sunlight, their bodies quick and certain, their hearts beating with the same fierce endurance that carried their ancestors through ice and fire. Grasses bend at the edge of the frame, survivors of every climate, drawing carbon from the air with the same quiet efficiency that once reshaped the atmosphere itself. Each living thing here is a sentence in the same unfinished book, each movement a word in a language the planet has been writing since before speech existed. The world is not new. Breathes again, brushing the wall, retreating, returning, its motion unbroken, its invitation eternal. The camera holds there, watching water and stone converse in endless cadence until distinction dissolves and only the pattern remains. The spiral continues, endless and familiar. It is the rhythm of the tide, the turn of the seasons, the heartbeat of all that survives. The pattern endures, and this time, it waits for us to decide what it becomes.